He paid her debt for a baby, but after taking her virginity and getting twins, he fell deeply in love and couldn't let her go. Hi, my beautiful family. It's your Mr. Peter. If you're new here, please don't scroll past. You didn't find this story. It found you. This is more than just a video. It's a space where hearts connect, where pain is understood, and where love never runs dry. Before anything, let me cover you in this prayer. Soft, sacred, and spoken with my whole heart. May love come to you like morning light, warm, gentle, and sure. May your storms begin to quiet. May peace rise inside you, even if the world outside doesn't change. I pray your heart finds what it's been aching for, healing, truth, and a place to rest. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are loved, fully, eternally, and just as you are. And family. Please pray for my Binta. She's been holding me up with love and strength, but she needs your prayers too. Just whisper her name with kindness. She'll feel it. Now I ask with love, don't leave this story in the middle. Stay. Feel it. Let it speak to you. And when it ends, please rate it out of 10. Not for numbers, for connection, for truth, for love, like this video. Drop a kind comment. Share it with someone who needs it. Let's remind the world what this family is. Loyal, real, and full of heart. Let's begin. With all my love, always.
The sound of her world crashing down wasn't the hurricane's roar. It was the silence that followed. Jennifer Warr stood in what had been the crown jewel of her restaurant empire, her hands trembling as she surveyed the devastation. Hurricane Eleanor had ripped through Charleston like an angry god, but the storm outside had been nothing compared to the one brewing in her business for months. Water dripped steadily from the collapsed ceiling of Magnolia Dreams, her flagship restaurant, each drop echoing in the hollow space where laughter and clinking glasses had once filled the air. "Miss Warr," the insurance adjuster's voice cut through her grief like a blade. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." Jennifer turned slowly, her designer heels crunching on broken glass and debris. Even in crisis, she maintained the poise that had carried her from a scholarship student at Harvard Business School to the owner of 5 successful restaurants across the Southeast. Her dark skin gleamed with perspiration, and her natural hair, usually perfectly styled, was pulled back in a simple ponytail, a small concession to the chaos surrounding her. "Let me guess," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. "You're denying my claim." The adjuster, a thin man with nervous eyes, shuffled his papers. "The hurricane damage is covered, but there's evidence of pre-existing structural issues that void the policy. Additionally, there appears to be significant financial irregularities in your business accounts that we're required to report to." "Financial irregularities?" Jennifer's composure cracked. "What are you talking about?" "Missing funds, Ms. Warr. Nearly $3 million that your business partner, Michael Chen, appears to have transferred to offshore accounts. The FBI is already investigating." The words hit her like physical blows. Michael, her trusted partner, her Harvard classmate, the man she'd built this empire with, had been stealing from her for months. While she'd been focused on expansion and innovation, he'd been systematically draining their accounts. "I had no knowledge of any transfers," Jennifer said, but even as she spoke, she knew how it sounded. The authorities would see a successful black woman in business and assume guilt before innocence. She'd fought those assumptions her entire career, proving herself twice as hard for half the recognition. Now it was all crumbling. Her phone buzzed with another call from her lawyer, another reporter, another creditor. The hurricane had been 3 days ago, but the real storm was just beginning. Criminal investigations, civil lawsuits, frozen assets. The legal machinery was already in motion, designed to grind her to dust. 8 months later, Jennifer stood outside the gleaming glass towers of Sando Industries, wearing a black catering uniform instead of the Armani suits that had once been her armor. The fall from grace had been methodical and merciless. One by one, her restaurants had closed, first from hurricane damage, then from legal complications when the FBI investigation froze her accounts. Her penthouse apartment, her car, even her grandmother's jewelry, all liquidated to pay legal fees and keep her out of prison. The catering job was a humiliation, but it was survival. She served champagne and canapes to the same circles that had once courted her as an equal, now invisible in her server's uniform. The irony wasn't lost on her that tonight's event was a merger celebration for Sando Industries, the kind of deal she'd once orchestrated herself. The salmon canapes are exquisite, one guest remarked to another as Jennifer refilled their glasses. Though I suppose after that war woman's scandal, no one trusts black entrepreneurs anymore. Jennifer's hand tightened on the champagne bottle, but she said nothing. She'd learned to swallow humiliation like bitter medicine, understanding that her survival depended on invisibility. That's when she heard the conversation that would change everything. "Patrick, you have to understand the gravity of the situation." The voice belonged to Margaret Whitfield, senior partner at Charleston's most prestigious law firm. Jennifer recognized her from the society pages. Old money, older prejudices. 18 months, Margaret. That's what my grandfather's will stipulates. The man's voice was deep, controlled, but Jennifer could hear the strain beneath the surface. "Marry and produce an heir by my 35th birthday, or Marcus inherits everything." Jennifer glanced toward the conversation, her trained eye for detail automatically cataloging what she saw. Patrick Sando stood with his back to her, his expensive suit tailored to perfection across broad shoulders. Dark hair, tall frame, commanding presence. Everything about him screamed power and wealth. But there was tension in his posture, a rigidity that spoke of a man under siege. "Your cousin has been quite strategic," Margaret continued. "The environmental lawsuits, the zoning challenges, the media campaign questioning your commitment to family values. He's making it impossible for you to find a suitable wife in your social circle. No woman wants to be seen as marrying you for money." "And yet," Patrick's voice turned bitter, "that's exactly what I need. A woman who will marry me for money, bear my child, and give me the 18 months I need to break the will's hold permanently." Jennifer froze, the champagne bottle suspended in her hand. She'd heard of inheritance clauses before. Wealthy families often use them to control their heirs' behavior. But this sounded different, more desperate. "The irony is," Patrick continued, "I need someone brilliant enough to handle the scrutiny, strong enough to weather the attacks, but desperate enough to agree to the arrangement. Where exactly does one find such a woman?" Margaret's laugh was cold. "Perhaps you should look among the fallen, darling. There are always casualties in the business world, people who once had everything and now have nothing to lose." Jennifer's breath caught. She thought of her empty bank account, her legal bills, the criminal charges still hanging over her head like a sword. She was exactly what Patrick Sando described: brilliant, strong, and desperate enough to consider the unthinkable. Patrick turned. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Jennifer felt a shock of recognition that had nothing to do with familiarity. His eyes were dark and intelligent, but there was something else there, a loneliness that matched her own. For a moment, neither moved. The party swirled around them, but Jennifer felt as though time had stopped. This man controlled billions, wielded power that could reshape entire industries, yet he stood trapped by his grandfather's manipulations just as surely as she was trapped by Michael's betrayal. Patrick's gaze traveled over her uniform, and she saw the exact moment when recognition dawned. He knew who she was, the disgraced entrepreneur, the cautionary tale whispered about in boardrooms. But instead of dismissal, she saw something else in his expression. Possibility. "Excuse me," he said to Margaret, never breaking eye contact with Jennifer. "I believe I see a solution to my problem." Jennifer's heart hammered as Patrick Sando walked toward her, each step measured and purposeful. She'd built an empire once before from nothing but ambition and intelligence. She'd lost everything to betrayal and circumstance. Now, standing in the ruins of her old life, she faced a choice that would either save her or damn her completely. The billionaire stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, subtle, masculine. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. "Jennifer War," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like either salvation or seduction. "We need to talk." The champagne bottle trembled in her hands as she realized that her empire might rise again, but the price would be everything she'd never thought she'd be willing to pay. Chapter 2. The Proposition. Some deals were made in boardrooms, others in bedrooms, but the most dangerous ones were made in desperation. The penthouse office atop Sando Industries felt like a temple to power, all floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek surfaces that reflected the Charleston skyline. Jennifer sat across from Patrick Sando's massive desk, acutely aware that she was still wearing her catering uniform, while he commanded the room in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. The contrast was intentional, she realized, a reminder of the vast gulf between their current positions. "Coffee?" Patrick asked, his tone businesslike as he moved to an elaborate espresso machine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Please." Jennifer kept her voice steady, though her heart was racing. 24 hours had passed since their brief encounter at the party, and she'd spent every moment wondering if she'd imagined the electricity in his gaze. Patrick prepared 2 cups with practiced efficiency, his movements precise and controlled. Everything about him spoke of discipline, from his perfect posture to the way he'd scheduled this meeting for exactly 7 a.m., claiming it was the only window in his impossibly packed schedule. When he handed her the coffee, their fingers brushed briefly, and Jennifer felt that same shock of awareness from the night before. "I assume you know why you're here," he said, settling into his chair with predatory grace. "You need a wife." "I need money." Jennifer met his gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated by his wealth or position. "The question is whether we can make a deal that serves both our purposes." A smile ghosted across Patrick's lips, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. "I appreciate directness. It's a rare quality in my world." He opened a leather portfolio and extracted a thick document. "I've had my legal team prepare a preliminary contract based on our mutual requirements." Jennifer accepted the papers, her business training kicking in automatically. She'd reviewed thousands of contracts in her former life, from vendor agreements to merger documents, but nothing had prepared her for this. $2 million, she read aloud, her voice steady despite her surprise. "Plus full legal representation to clear my criminal charges, with additional compensation based on specific milestones." "Including the successful birth of a healthy child," Patrick added. "My grandfather's will requires proof of paternity and the child's legitimacy. Any heir born out of wedlock is automatically disqualified." Jennifer flipped through the pages, her analytical mind cataloging the terms. Prenuptial agreement, medical requirements, confidentiality clauses, living arrangements. It was the most comprehensive document she'd ever seen, and the most cold-blooded. "Your cousin Marcus," she said, looking up from the contract. "Tell me about him." Patrick's expression darkened. "My grandfather's favorite nephew, charming, traditional, and a complete sociopath. He spent the last 5 years systematically destroying everything I've built, claiming it's to preserve the family legacy from my progressive policies." "What kind of policies?" "Urban development that actually benefits communities instead of displacing them. environmental initiatives that cost short-term profits for long-term sustainability, diversity programs that Marcus considers social engineering. Patrick's jaw tightened. He's convinced the family board that I'm too liberal, too idealistic to handle the fortune responsibly. Jennifer nodded, understanding the subtext. Marcus represented old money, old prejudices, old ways of doing business that prioritized profit over people. And if he inherits? The first thing he'll do is shut down every community development project I've initiated. Thousands of jobs lost, dozens of neighborhoods abandoned to gentrification. Patrick's voice was controlled, but she could see the fury in his dark eyes. Everything I've worked for destroyed. So this isn't just about money, Jennifer realized. It's about legacy. My legacy. And the legacy of every person whose life I can change for the better. Patrick leaned forward, his intensity palpable. I won't pretend this arrangement is romantic, Jennifer. But it's not meaningless either. You'd be helping me save something that matters. Jennifer studied his face, searching for deception and finding none. She'd built her career on reading people, on understanding their motivations and pressure points. Patrick Sando was many things, powerful, wealthy, undoubtedly arrogant. But he wasn't lying about this. Why me? She asked. You could have your pick of society wives, women who jump at the chance to marry a billionaire. Could I? Patrick's smile was bitter. My social circle sees me as toxic right now, thanks to Marcus's campaign. The environmental lawsuits, the media attacks questioning my fitness to lead. No socialite wants to be associated with that controversy. And frankly, most of them lack the intelligence to handle what's coming. What's coming? War. Patrick's voice was flat. Marcus won't give up just because I fulfill the will's requirements. He'll attack my wife, my child, my marriage. Anything to prove I'm unfit for the inheritance. I need someone who can fight back, someone with the strength and intelligence to be a true partner. Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. She thought this was about a business arrangement, but Patrick was describing something far more dangerous. You're asking me to put myself in the line of fire. I'm asking you to help me win a war that will determine the fate of thousands of people. Patrick pulled out another folder, this one filled with photographs and documents. These are the communities my development projects have transformed, the jobs created, the families housed, the children given opportunities they never would have had otherwise. Jennifer flipped through the images, before and after shots of neighborhoods, smiling families, ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The scope of Patrick's work was staggering, but more than that, it was meaningful. He wasn't just building wealth, he was building hope. Marcus has already hired investigators to dig into your background, Patrick continued. They'll find the embezzlement charges, the failed businesses, every mistake you've ever made. They'll use it all to paint you as a gold digger who corrupted me with your greed. And what makes you think I can handle that kind of scrutiny? Patrick's gaze was steady, assessing. Because you've already survived it once. You lost everything and kept fighting. Most people would have given up, fled the city, changed their names. Instead, you're here, serving canapes to people who used to beg for your attention, planning your comeback. He paused. That takes a special kind of strength. Jennifer felt something shift inside her, a recognition of being truly seen for the first time in months. Patrick understood what it meant to be under siege, to have everything you'd built threatened by forces beyond your control. The 2 million is just the beginning, Patrick said quietly. There's another 3 million upon successful birth of a healthy child, plus opportunities for you to rebuild your restaurant empire once this is resolved. I have retail properties sitting empty, prime locations that would be perfect for the right entrepreneur. The offer was tempting beyond measure. Jennifer could already envision it. New restaurants, better locations, a chance to prove that her fall had been temporary. but something nagged at her, a detail that didn't quite fit. "You investigated me thoroughly," she said slowly. "You know my background, my education, my business experience. This isn't a random choice. Why do you really want me?" Patrick was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled as he considered his answer. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more vulnerable than she'd heard before. "Because you understand what it means to build something from nothing. You know the value of hard work, of fighting for what you believe in. And because—" he hesitated, then met her eyes directly. "Because when I looked at you last night, I saw someone who could be my equal, not just my employee." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Jennifer felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack, dangerous emotions stirring in her chest. This was supposed to be business, nothing more. "I need time to think," she said, closing the contract. "You have 24 hours," Patrick replied, all business again. "The inheritance deadline is 14 months away, and Marcus's legal team is moving fast. Every day we delay gives him more ammunition." Jennifer stood, smoothing her uniform with as much dignity as she could muster. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow." "Jennifer." Patrick's voice stopped her at the door. "Whatever you decide, know that I respect what you've accomplished and what you've survived. Not many people could have handled what you've been through with such grace." As Jennifer left the penthouse, her mind was already racing through possibilities and consequences. She could take the deal and risk everything on a man she barely knew, or she could walk away and accept that her dreams were truly dead. But as the elevator descended toward the lobby, taking her back to her diminished world, she already knew what her answer would be. Some risks were worth taking, especially when the alternative was surrendering to defeat. Patrick Sando needed a wife. She needed a second chance. Perhaps together they could give each other exactly what they required, even if neither of them fully understood the price they'd ultimately pay. Chapter 3. Crossing the Line. The signature on a contract was just ink on paper, but the "I do" that followed would bind their fates forever. The Charleston courthouse felt surprisingly intimate for such a momentous occasion. Jennifer stood beside Patrick in the small ceremony room, wearing a simple cream-colored dress she'd purchased that morning with money from her first payment. Her hands were steady as she signed the marriage certificate, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. "By the power vested in me by the state of South Carolina, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Judge Morrison's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were conducting any routine legal proceeding, rather than binding two strangers in matrimony. Patrick turned to face her, his steel-gray eyes unreadable. "For better or worse," he murmured, the traditional words taking on new meaning in their unconventional circumstances. "For business or pleasure," Jennifer replied quietly, attempting levity to cover the strange intimacy of the moment. His smile was brief but genuine before he leaned down to brush his lips against hers. The kiss was chaste, appropriate for their witnesses, Patrick's lawyer, Margaret Whitfield, and Jennifer's hastily appointed legal representation. But even that simple contact sent an unexpected jolt through Jennifer's system, a preview of complications she hadn't anticipated. "Congratulations, Mrs. Sando," Margaret said dryly as they separated. "I hope you're prepared for what comes next." Jennifer wasn't sure anyone could be prepared for what came next. Within hours of the ceremony, the news broke across Charleston's social media networks like wildfire. Photos of their courthouse wedding appeared on gossip blogs within the hour, accompanied by speculation that ranged from romantic whirlwind to calculated merger. "Billionaire Patrick Sando marries disgraced restaurant owner in secret ceremony," read the headline on Charleston's Social Scene's website. The article was brutal, dissecting Jennifer's fall from grace with surgical precision while questioning Patrick's judgment in choosing such a controversial bride. They're calling it a publicity stunt, Jennifer said, scrolling through her phone as their limousine pulled away from the courthouse. Some kind of desperate attempt to rehabilitate both our images. Let them talk, Patrick replied, loosening his tie with quick, efficient movements. Marcus was always going to control the narrative initially. Our job is to prove them wrong through our actions, not our words. The limousine pulled into the circular drive of Patrick's estate, a sprawling antebellum mansion that had been in his family for generations. Jennifer had seen photographs of it in architectural magazines, but standing before the actual structure was overwhelming. This was her home now, at least temporarily, a concept that felt as foreign as the platinum wedding band weighing down her finger. The staff is discreet, Patrick said as they walked up the front steps. They understand the situation and will respect your privacy. Mrs. Henley, my housekeeper, has prepared the blue suite for you. It connects to the master bedroom but maintains your independence. Jennifer nodded, though the mention of connecting bedrooms sent another flutter of nervousness through her chest. They discussed the logistics extensively, but the reality of sharing living space with this man was more daunting than she'd expected. The blue suite was exquisite, all French doors and antique furniture, with a view of the estate's gardens that would have taken her breath away under different circumstances. Someone had already unpacked her few belongings, the sight of her clothes hanging in the massive walk-in closet, both touching and slightly overwhelming. "There's a welcome reception tonight," Patrick said from the doorway, his presence filling the space despite maintaining a respectful distance. "Charleston's business elite, a few political figures. Marcus will be there, of course, along with most of my family." "A trial by fire," Jennifer interpreted, "the first of many." Patrick's expression grew serious. "They'll be watching for any sign that our marriage is artificial. We need to appear united, committed, genuinely attracted to each other." The word attracted hung in the air between them, loaded with implications they hadn't fully addressed. Jennifer had been so focused on the business aspects of their arrangement that she'd avoided thinking about the physical realities of marriage, even a marriage of convenience. "How do you suggest we handle that?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady. Patrick studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense enough to make her skin warm. "We tell the truth," he said finally, "that we're drawn to each other despite the circumstances, that our connection surprised us both." It wasn't entirely a lie, Jennifer realized. The attraction she felt toward Patrick was unexpected and inconvenient, but undeniably real. The way he looked at her made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced since her divorce years earlier. The challenge would be managing that attraction within the confines of their business arrangement. The reception that evening was exactly the ordeal Jennifer had anticipated. Charleston's elite gathered in the Sando family's historic mansion, their polite smiles hiding sharp curiosity and sharper judgment. Jennifer wore a black cocktail dress that hugged her curves without being inappropriate, her natural hair styled in elegant curls that framed her face. She'd learned long ago that confidence was her best accessory, but tonight even her considerable poise was being tested. "Jennifer, darling," came a honeyed voice from behind her. She turned to find a stunning blonde woman approaching, her smile predatory despite its perfection. "I'm Catherine Sando, Patrick's mother. How wonderful to finally meet my new daughter-in-law." The woman's handshake was firm, but her eyes were cold as winter. Catherine Sando was everything Jennifer had expected, old money personified, with the kind of refined beauty that came from generations of careful breeding and even more careful maintenance. "Mrs. Sando," Jennifer replied warmly, "thank you for welcoming me into your family." "Oh, call me Catherine, dear. After all, we're family now." The word family was delivered with just enough emphasis to make clear that Catherine considered Jennifer an unwelcome addition. "I must say your wedding was quite intimate." Very modern of Patrick to choose such an unconventional approach. We preferred to focus on our commitment rather than spectacle, Jennifer replied smoothly, sensing the trap in Catherine's words. How romantic! Catherine's smile never wavered. Though I hope you understand that being a Sando wife requires certain standards. Our family has been part of Charleston society for over 2 centuries. We have obligations, expectations, a reputation to maintain. The message was clear. Jennifer was being measured and found wanting before she'd even had a chance to prove herself. But before she could respond, a strong arm slipped around her waist, and Patrick's familiar warmth settled against her side. Mother, Patrick's voice held a warning that made Catherine's smile tighten. I see you've met my wife. Isn't she magnificent? The possessive pride in his tone sent an unexpected thrill through Jennifer's body, even though she knew it was largely for show. Patrick's hand splayed across her hip, his thumb tracing small circles that she was certain were unconscious, but no less distracting. Magnificent, Catherine agreed, though her tone suggested she found Jennifer anything but. We were just discussing family traditions and expectations. Jennifer exceeds every expectation I've ever had, Patrick replied, his gaze dropping to meet Jennifer's eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. She's brilliant, beautiful, and strong enough to handle anything our family can throw at her. For a moment, Jennifer forgot they had an audience. The way Patrick was looking at her made her feel like the most desirable woman in the room, despite knowing their marriage was a business arrangement. The line between performance and reality was blurring in dangerous ways. How wonderful, a new voice interrupted, this one male and carrying an edge of barely concealed hostility. Jennifer turned to see a man who could only be Marcus Sando approaching, Patrick's build but softer around the edges, with pale blue eyes that reminded her of a shark's. Cousin, Patrick's greeting was arctic. I was wondering when you'd make your appearance. I wouldn't miss meeting the new Mrs. Sando, Marcus replied, his gaze raking over Jennifer with obvious disdain. Though I must admit, Patrick, your choice of bride is surprising. Very progressive of you to marry someone with such an interesting financial history. The insult was delivered with a smile, but Jennifer felt its sting nonetheless. Around them, conversations quieted as other guests sensed the tension building between the two men. My wife's business acumen is one of the reasons I was drawn to her, Patrick replied evenly. Unlike some people, she built her success through innovation and hard work rather than inheritance. Of course, Marcus's smile widened, though one does wonder about the timing. A hasty marriage to a woman facing criminal charges, it almost looks like desperation. Jennifer felt Patrick's body tense beside her, his protective instincts flaring. But before he could respond, she stepped forward, her own smile razor-sharp. You're right about the timing, she said pleasantly. Patrick and I couldn't wait any longer to start our life together. When you find your perfect match, why delay? She turned to look up at Patrick, letting genuine affection show in her expression. Besides, some of us prefer to create our own legacy rather than simply inheriting one. The barb hit its mark, Marcus's smile faltering slightly. Patrick's hand tightened on her waist, and she could feel his approval in the gesture. Indeed, Marcus recovered quickly. Well, I wish you both every happiness. Though I do hope you understand that marriage requires more than just business compatibility. With that parting shot, he drifted away, leaving Jennifer feeling like she'd just survived her first battle in a war she was only beginning to understand. Later that evening, after the last guests had departed and the staff had retired, Jennifer found herself alone with Patrick in the mansion's library. The room was all leather and mahogany, thousands of books lining the walls from floor to ceiling. Patrick stood by the fireplace, tie loosened and jacket discarded, looking more human than she'd yet seen him. "You handled Marcus perfectly tonight," he said without preamble. "He expected you to be intimidated." "I've dealt with worse than him," Jennifer replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. There had been something predatory about Marcus's attention, a sense that he was cataloging weaknesses to exploit later. "This is only the beginning," Patrick warned. "He'll escalate now that he's measured the opposition. We need to be prepared for anything." Jennifer nodded, understanding the gravity of what they'd undertaken. But as she watched Patrick in the firelight, his guard finally lowered after the evening's performance, she realized there was another complication she hadn't anticipated. She was genuinely attracted to her husband, not just to his power or his money, but to the man himself. The way he'd protected her tonight, the pride in his voice when he'd called her magnificent, the careful way he'd touched her that somehow managed to be both respectful and possessive, it all added up to a dangerous emotional equation. "Patrick," she said quietly, stepping closer to where he stood, "about the other aspects of our arrangement. The more intimate requirements." His eyes darkened at her words, and she saw her own awareness reflected there. Whatever was happening between them went beyond their contract, and they both knew it. "We don't have to rush anything," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "We can take our time, make sure we're both comfortable with—" Jennifer silenced him by reaching up to cup his face, her thumb tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I want to," she whispered, surprised by her own boldness. "Not because of the contract, but because I want to know what it feels like to be your wife in every sense." Patrick's control finally snapped. He pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was nothing like the chaste peck they'd shared at the courthouse. This kiss was hunger and need and promise, his hands tangling in her hair as she melted against his solid warmth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jennifer saw her own desire reflected in his eyes. Whatever happened next between them would cross a line from which there was no return, from business arrangement to something far more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. "Are you sure?" Patrick asked, his forehead resting against hers. Jennifer's answer was to take his hand and lead him toward the door, toward the master bedroom and the beginning of their real marriage, whatever that might ultimately mean for both of them. Chapter 4. Playing the Game. Power was a language Jennifer had always spoken fluently, but marriage was a dialect she was still learning to navigate. 6 weeks into their marriage, Jennifer sat in the boardroom of Sando Industries, surrounded by men in expensive suits who clearly resented her presence. The morning acquisition meeting had been proceeding smoothly until she'd quietly pointed out a fatal flaw in their target company's environmental compliance reports, a discovery that had just saved Patrick's company from a $20 million lawsuit. "How exactly did you spot this when our entire due diligence team missed it?" asked Robert Marsh, Patrick's CFO, his tone suggesting he thought she'd been lucky rather than competent. Jennifer smiled pleasantly, used to having her expertise questioned. "I spent 2 years navigating environmental regulations when I was expanding my restaurant chain into different municipalities. The compliance language in Hartwell Industries reports is outdated. They're still using 2019 standards for waste management protocols." She pulled up the relevant documents on the conference room's smart screen, highlighting the discrepancies with the confidence of someone who'd built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch. Around the table, expressions shifted from skepticism to grudging respect. "If we'd proceeded with the acquisition," she continued, "we would have inherited liability for 4 years of non-compliance. The EPA fines alone would have cost us more than the acquisition price." Patrick leaned back in his chair at the head of the table, his expression unreadable but for the slight curve of his lips. "Gentlemen, I believe my wife has just earned her keep. Again." It was the third time in as many weeks that Jennifer's insights had saved the company significant money. Her restaurant industry background had given her expertise in areas most corporate executives overlooked: supply chain vulnerabilities, regulatory compliance, consumer behavior patterns. She wasn't just Patrick's wife anymore. She was becoming a genuine asset to his business empire. We should table the Hartwell acquisition until they remediate their compliance issues, Patrick decided. Robert, reach out to their legal team and let them know what we've discovered. We might be able to renegotiate terms once they understand their exposure. As the meeting dispersed, Jennifer remained seated, reviewing her notes on a laptop Patrick had provided her. Top-of-the-line equipment that reminded her daily of how far she'd fallen and how far she'd climbed back. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now had better resources as Patrick's wife than she'd had as the owner of her own company. "Impressive as always," Patrick said once they were alone. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, a concession to the late hour that somehow made him even more attractive. "Though I'm starting to think I'm not paying you enough. According to our prenup, you're paying me exactly what we agreed upon," Jennifer replied, though she couldn't help smiling at his praise. The validation felt good, better than it should have, considering their arrangement was supposed to be purely business. "About that," Patrick's expression grew serious as he moved to close the conference room door. "We need to discuss the timeline for the next phase of our arrangement." Jennifer's stomach fluttered with a combination of anticipation and anxiety. They'd been sharing a home for 6 weeks, gradually growing more comfortable with each other's presence, but they hadn't yet addressed the elephant in the room, the requirement for her to become pregnant within the remaining months before Patrick's 35th birthday. Their physical relationship had been progressing slowly, almost cautiously. Patrick was an attentive husband in public, playing his part perfectly, but in private he maintained a respectful distance that was both gentlemanly and frustrating. They'd shared lingering conversations over dinner, discovered mutual interests in classic literature and jazz music, and felt the gradual building of something neither had expected. "The investigative team Marcus hired has been asking questions around town," Patrick continued, "about our relationship, our living arrangements, the authenticity of our marriage. We need to be prepared for more intensive scrutiny." "What kind of questions?" Jennifer asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. "Whether we sleep in the same bedroom, whether we seem genuinely affectionate or just performing for cameras, whether there are any signs that our marriage is producing the heir required by the will." Patrick's jaw tightened. "Marcus is building a case that our marriage is fraudulent, which would void the inheritance clause entirely." Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. She'd known this wouldn't be easy, but the reality of being under constant surveillance was more unsettling than she'd expected. "So what do you suggest?" Patrick was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the conference table in the first nervous gesture she'd seen from him. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I think it's time we made our marriage real in every sense, not just for the inheritance, but for our protection." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond their original contract. Jennifer's heart rate accelerated as she studied Patrick's face, searching for his true feelings beneath the businessman's mask. "And if I get pregnant?" she asked quietly. "This becomes permanent, doesn't it? Not just a business arrangement anymore." "Would that be so terrible?" Patrick's question was soft, vulnerable in a way she rarely heard from him. "Being permanently connected to me." Before Jennifer could answer, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood freeze. The text was from an unknown number, but the message was crystal clear. "Your husband's slumming days are numbered. Enjoy the penthouse while you can. A friend." "Patrick," she said, showing him the message. "I think Marcus just escalated." Patrick's expression darkened as he read the text. "He's getting desperate. The board meeting to review my performance isn't for another year, But if he can prove our marriage is fraudulent before then, he can challenge my standing immediately. What does that mean for us? It means we need to accelerate our timeline. Patrick stood and began pacing, his strategic mind already working through scenarios. And we need to be smarter about our public appearances, more convincing. Over the next 2 weeks, Jennifer threw herself into the role of Patrick's devoted wife with the same intensity she'd once brought to building her restaurant empire. They attended charity galas where she charmed donors and potential investors. She accompanied him to business dinners where her insights into market trends impressed even his most skeptical colleagues. To the outside world, they appeared to be the perfect power couple, successful, attractive, deeply in love. But it was the private moments that began to blur the lines between performance and reality. Patrick would brush his hand across the small of her back as they walked into a restaurant, sending electricity through her entire body. She would catch him watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with their business arrangement and everything to do with genuine desire. The night everything changed started like any other. They'd attended a fundraiser for one of Patrick's urban development projects, an evening that showcased the best of what his company could accomplish. Jennifer had worn a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves perfectly, and she'd noticed the way Patrick's gaze had followed her all evening. "You were magnificent tonight," Patrick said as they entered his study, the same room where they'd shared their first real conversation weeks earlier. "The way you handled Senator Williams when he questioned the project's viability, I've never seen him back down so gracefully." "He underestimated what I know about zoning law," Jennifer replied, accepting the glass of wine Patrick offered her. "Most politicians assume restaurant owners don't understand complex regulations." "Their loss is my gain," Patrick said, moving closer. The familiar heat was building between them again, that magnetic pull that seemed to grow stronger every day. "Patrick," Jennifer set down her wine glass, suddenly needing to address the tension that had been building for weeks. "We keep dancing around this, but we both know where we're headed. The question is whether we're doing this because we have to or because we want to." Patrick's answer was to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones with devastating tenderness. "I stopped thinking about the contract weeks ago," he admitted. "This isn't about Marcus or the inheritance anymore. This is about you and me and what's happening between us." Jennifer felt her last reservations crumble. She'd been trying to maintain emotional distance to protect herself from getting too invested in a relationship that had started as a business transaction. But the man looking at her now wasn't the cold billionaire from their first meeting. This was Patrick, brilliant, passionate, unexpectedly vulnerable, and she wanted him with an intensity that terrified her. Their lovemaking that night was everything their wedding night hadn't been. Passionate, tender, real. Patrick worshipped her body with a reverence that made her feel beautiful and desired in ways she'd forgotten were possible. When she cried out his name in the darkness, it wasn't the name of a convenient husband. It was the name of a man she was dangerously close to loving. Afterward, they lay entwined in Patrick's massive bed, her head on his chest as his fingers traced patterns on her bare shoulder. The silence between them was comfortable, but charged with the weight of what had just changed between them. "Jennifer," Patrick's voice was rough with emotion, "I want you to know that whatever happens with the inheritance, whatever Marcus tries to do to us, this is real. What we just shared, it's not part of any contract." Jennifer lifted her head to look at him, seeing truth in his intense gaze. "I know," she whispered. "I feel it too." But even as she said the words, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, judged, and found wanting by forces beyond their control. Marcus's threat hung over them like a sword, and Jennifer knew that their happiness was built on a foundation that could crumble at any moment. 2 weeks later, Jennifer stood in her ensuite bathroom at 6 in the morning, staring at a pregnancy test that had just changed everything. Two pink lines stared back at her, confirming what she'd suspected for days. After 6 weeks of marriage and growing intimacy with Patrick, their careful restraint had finally given way to passion and consequences that filled her with both joy and anxiety. She was carrying Patrick's child. The realization should have filled her with triumph. They'd succeeded in fulfilling the inheritance requirement ahead of schedule. Instead, she felt a complex mix of emotions that surprised her with their intensity. Joy, yes, but also fierce protectiveness and a love for this tiny life that already felt overwhelming. "Jennifer?" Patrick's voice came from the bedroom. "Everything okay?" She emerged from the bathroom, pregnancy test in hand, to find Patrick sitting on the edge of the bed, his hair mussed from sleep. When he saw what she was holding, his expression transformed from concern to wonder to pure, undiluted joy. "We did it," he breathed, standing to pull her into his arms. "We actually did it." Jennifer melted into his embrace, feeling for the first time since their arrangement began that they might actually have a chance at happiness. But even as Patrick spun her around the bedroom, laughing with delight, she couldn't forget Marcus's threats or the investigators watching their every move. Their child would be born into a war they were only beginning to understand, and Jennifer was determined to make sure they won, no matter what it cost her. The game had just changed completely, and the stakes had never been higher. Chapter 5. Secrets and Revelations. The most dangerous secrets weren't the ones you kept. They were the ones that kept themselves until the perfect moment to destroy you. Jennifer stood in the doorway of Patrick's home office, watching him pace behind his desk like a caged predator. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, but the tension in the room was as dark as a storm cloud. In his hand, he clutched a manila envelope that had been delivered an hour earlier. No return address, no signature, just devastating contents that changed everything. "How long have you known?" Patrick's voice was deadly quiet as he turned to face her, his steel-gray eyes holding a fury she'd never seen before. "Known what?" Jennifer stepped into the room, her heart already racing, even though she didn't understand what had triggered his rage. Patrick pulled a photograph from the envelope and held it up. The image was crystal clear. Jennifer entering a medical building downtown, her hand unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach. Someone had been following her, documenting her every move. "Someone's been surveilling us," Patrick said, his voice clipped. "But that's not what concerns me most. Look at the date." Jennifer moved closer to examine the photograph, and her blood ran cold. The timestamp in the corner showed yesterday's date, but she hadn't visited any medical facilities yesterday. "This photo is staged," she realized. "Someone is creating false evidence of my movements." "I don't understand," she said slowly. "How did someone know to follow me? I hadn't told anyone, not even my best friend Maya." "Because someone has been watching us since the day we got married," Patrick said grimly. He pulled out more photos. Jennifer at the grocery store, leaving her lawyer's office, meeting Maya for coffee. Every mundane moment of her life for the past month, documented with professional precision. "Marcus," Jennifer breathed, understanding flooding through her. "It gets worse." Patrick extracted a thick document from the envelope. "Legal brief challenging the validity of our marriage. Marcus has been building a case that our entire relationship is fraudulent, designed specifically to circumvent the inheritance clause." Jennifer skimmed the document, her business law training helping her understand the legal jargon. The brief was comprehensive and damning, painting their marriage as a calculated business transaction with detailed evidence of their separate bedrooms, professional interactions, and what was described as obvious mutual antipathy masked by financial desperation. "Half of this is lies," she said, anger building in her chest. "The other half is taken completely out of context." But it's compelling enough to create doubt, Patrick replied. And doubt is all Marcus needs to delay the inheritance transfer while he builds a stronger case. Jennifer's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was blocked, but something compelled her to answer. Mrs. Sandow, a smooth male voice she recognized as Marcus said, "I trust you've received my little gift by now. What do you want?" Jennifer kept her voice steady, though her free hand instinctively moved to her stomach. "A conversation. Privately. There are certain realities about your situation that I think you should understand before you make any irreversible decisions." "I'm not meeting with you," Jennifer said immediately. "Oh, but you are," Marcus's voice took on a harder edge. "Because if you don't, that legal brief gets filed tomorrow morning. And I have additional evidence that would make your current criminal charges look like a parking ticket." The line went dead, leaving Jennifer staring at her phone with a mixture of rage and fear. Patrick had been listening to the conversation, his face growing darker with each word. "He's bluffing," Patrick said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is he?" Jennifer sank into one of the leather chairs facing Patrick's desk. "He's had investigators following me for weeks. Who knows what they've found or what they think they've found?" Patrick moved around the desk to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. The gesture was tender, protective, and it made Jennifer's heart ache with how much she'd come to care for this man in such a short time. "Whatever he threatens, whatever he claims to have, we'll face it together," Patrick said firmly. "Our marriage may have started as a business arrangement, but what we have now is real. Anyone with eyes can see that." "Can they?" Jennifer studied Patrick's face, searching for certainty. "Because sometimes I wonder if we're just really good at convincing ourselves." Patrick's answer was to pull her into his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was desperate, passionate, and utterly convincing. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Does that feel like acting to you?" he whispered. Before Jennifer could answer, her phone rang again. This time it was Maya, her voice tight with worry. "Jen, we need to talk. Right now. There are things about your situation you don't know, and Marcus Sandow has been asking questions about our friendship." 20 minutes later, Jennifer sat across from Maya in a small cafe across town, having insisted on meeting somewhere public despite Patrick's protests. Her best friend looked haggard, stress lines etched around her dark eyes. "Start talking," Jennifer said without preamble. "Marcus approached me 2 weeks ago," Maya began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He offered me $50,000 for information about your relationship with Patrick. When it started, how often you see each other, whether you seemed genuinely happy or just going through the motions." Jennifer felt betrayal cut through her like a blade. "Please tell me you didn't—" "Of course I didn't take his money," Maya said quickly. "But Jen, he knows things. About your finances, about the real reason your restaurants failed, about Michael's embezzlement. Things that were supposed to be sealed in court documents." "What kind of things?" Maya pulled out her phone and showed Jennifer a series of photos, documents that looked like bank statements, email exchanges, financial records. Jennifer recognized some of them from her legal proceedings, but others were completely unfamiliar. "He claims he has evidence that you were involved in the embezzlement," Maya said. "That you and Michael were working together to defraud investors before the hurricane gave you cover to disappear the money." "That's insane," Jennifer said, but even as the words left her mouth, she understood how damaging such accusations could be. "There's no evidence because it didn't happen." "I know that," Maya said, "but Marcus is good at making lies look like truth. He showed me forged bank records, fake email communications, witness statements from people who claim you were acting suspiciously in the months before your restaurants collapsed." Jennifer felt the walls closing in around her. Everything she'd rebuilt, everything she'd fought for, was being systematically destroyed by a man who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. There's more, Maya continued reluctantly. He knows about your pregnancy, and he has a theory about why you really married Patrick. Let me guess, Jennifer said bitterly. I seduced him to get pregnant with his child, then planned to blackmail him or disappear with a massive divorce settlement. Close. He thinks you're planning to claim the child isn't Patrick's after it's born, that you'll demand a DNA test that will show Patrick isn't the father, voiding the inheritance clause while leaving you with alimony and child support. The accusation was so outrageous that Jennifer almost laughed. Except the child is Patrick's. We can prove that. Can you? Maya's expression was grave. Because Marcus claims he has evidence that you were involved with someone else around the time you would have conceived. Hotel records, credit card receipts, witness statements. Jennifer's mind raced, trying to think of any situation that could be misconstrued as infidelity. Then she remembered. Her lawyer, David Chen, no relation to her former business partner, had taken her to dinner twice to discuss her legal strategy. Both meetings had been at hotels where he was staying during business trips to Charleston. Completely innocent, but in the right context. He's manufacturing evidence, Jennifer said, understanding the scope of Marcus's deception. Creating a false narrative that makes me look like a conniving gold digger. And it's working, Maya said sadly. I've heard the rumors starting to circulate in your old social circles. People are saying Patrick was manipulated by a desperate woman who played on his loneliness. Jennifer closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the conspiracy pressing down on her. Marcus wasn't just attacking her marriage, he was systematically destroying her reputation, her relationships, and her future. When she opened her eyes, Maya was studying her with concern. Jen, maybe you should consider his offer. If you walk away now, disappear quietly, maybe he'll drop the criminal charges and leave you alone. You want me to abandon my husband? Jennifer couldn't keep the shock from her voice. I want you to survive this, Maya replied. Marcus Sando has unlimited resources and no conscience. How long do you think you can fight someone like that? Jennifer stood up from the table, her decision crystallizing with startling clarity. As long as it takes. Patrick and I are in this together now, and I'm not going to let Marcus destroy what we've built. What you've built? Maya's voice held disbelief. Jen, you've known the man for 6 weeks. How can you be sure what you feel for him is real and not just gratitude for being rescued? It was a fair question, one Jennifer had asked herself repeatedly. But as she thought about Patrick, his intelligence, his passion for justice, the way he'd protected her from his family's prejudices, the gentleness he showed her in private moments, she knew the answer. Because I'd rather fight beside him and lose than win without him, Jennifer said simply. When Jennifer returned to the estate, she found Patrick in his study with his legal team, war planning their response to Marcus's threats. The sight of him bent over legal documents, his sleeves rolled up and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it, made her heart clench with fierce protectiveness. Whatever Marcus has planned, she announced as she entered the room, we fight it together. Patrick looked up, relief flooding his features. You're sure? Because once we commit to this path, there's no backing down. Marcus will use every weapon in his arsenal. Then we'll use ours, Jennifer replied, moving to stand beside his chair. I'm not just your wife anymore, Patrick. I'm your partner in every sense of the word, and partners don't abandon each other when things get difficult. Patrick reached up to take her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt like a promise. In that case, Mrs. Sando, let's go to war. As Jennifer looked around the room at the lawyers and strategists who would help them fight Marcus's campaign of destruction, she felt something she hadn't experienced since her restaurants collapsed. Hope. Not just for survival, but for victory. Marcus had made one critical error in his calculations. He'd assumed Jennifer was just another gold digger who would cut and run when the pressure mounted. Instead, he'd united two formidable opponents who were discovering that together they were unstoppable. The battle for Patrick's inheritance and their future was about to begin in earnest. Chapter 6. Love in the Crossfire. In war, the most dangerous casualties weren't physical wounds. They were the hearts that forgot how to trust in the midst of battle. The charity gala at the Charleston Museum was supposed to be their public debut as a united front against Marcus's attacks. But Jennifer could feel the whispers following them across the crowded ballroom like invisible daggers. 3 days had passed since Marcus's threats escalated, and the society rumor mill had been working overtime, spreading carefully crafted doubt about their marriage's authenticity. "Smile," Patrick murmured against her ear as they posed for photographers, his hand warm and possessive on the small of her back. "Let them see how madly in love we are." Jennifer turned her face up to his, and for a moment the pretense fell away. The look in Patrick's dark eyes was raw, hungry, and completely genuine. When he kissed her, soft and lingering, she felt her knees weaken despite the very public setting. "That wasn't acting," she whispered against his lips. "No," Patrick agreed, his voice rough with desire. "It wasn't." The evening had been a calculated performance. Jennifer wore a stunning emerald gown that showcased her figure perfectly, while Patrick couldn't seem to keep his hands off her. To outside observers, they looked like newlyweds, so besotted with each other that they could barely maintain appropriate public behavior. But Jennifer could feel the tension coiled in Patrick's body, see the way his gaze constantly scanned the crowd for threats. Marcus was in custody, but his influence lived on through allies and hired investigators. The pressure of constant surveillance was taking its toll on both of them. "Mrs. Sandow," a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor Hartwell, Patrick's ex-fiancée, materialized beside them with a smile that didn't reach her calculating blue eyes. "How lovely to see you looking so radiant." Jennifer's grip tightened on Patrick's arm as she studied the woman who'd once held his heart. Eleanor was everything Jennifer wasn't: blonde, delicate, with the kind of refined beauty that came from generations of careful breeding. She was also, according to Patrick, completely without conscience. "Eleanor," Patrick's voice was arctic, "I'm surprised to see you here. This charity supports urban development initiatives, not exactly your usual cause." "Oh, I've developed quite an interest in your recent developments," Eleanor replied, her smile growing more predatory. "Charleston society is buzzing with rumors about your whirlwind romance. Some people are wondering what exactly prompted such a hasty marriage." The implication was clear, but Jennifer refused to be intimidated. "Patrick and I believe in acting on our convictions," she said pleasantly. "When you find someone who shares your values and vision for the future, why wait?" Eleanor's perfect composure slipped for just a moment. "How refreshing, though I do hope you're prepared for the scrutiny that comes with being a Sandow wife. The family has such high standards." "I'm prepared for anything," Jennifer replied smoothly. "Patrick and I face everything together." With that, Eleanor glided away, but not before Jennifer caught the malicious gleam in her eyes. Whatever she was planning, it wouldn't be good. They found out 2 hours later when Patrick's phone exploded with notifications. Someone had leaked a story to Charleston's most notorious gossip blogger, complete with anonymous sources, claiming Jennifer had been seen meeting secretly with men throughout her marriage to Patrick. "Listen to this," Patrick said grimly as they sat in the back of their limousine. "Sources close to the couple suggest Mrs. Sandow has been maintaining inappropriate relationships while her husband focuses on business. The timing of recent developments has raised questions that could have significant implications for the Sandow family interests." Jennifer felt sick reading the carefully crafted lies. The story painted her as a calculating woman who trapped Patrick into marriage while conducting affairs behind his back. They're setting up a narrative, she realized, making me look like I'm using you. Eleanor's fingerprints are all over this, Patrick replied, his jaw tight with controlled fury. She's working with Marcus's remaining allies, trying to create enough doubt to challenge the inheritance. Instead of pulling away emotionally, as Jennifer had feared he might, Patrick moved closer, taking her hand in his. We need to be smarter about how we respond to these attacks. More strategic. What do you suggest? We go on the offensive, Patrick said, his eyes blazing with determination. I'm tired of playing defense while they attack you. It's time to show Charleston exactly what kind of woman I married. The next morning, Patrick surprised Jennifer by taking her to his corporate headquarters, not for a meeting, but to introduce her properly to his senior staff. Instead of hiding her away from potential controversy, he was positioning her as his partner in every sense. Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick announced to the assembled executives, I want you to meet my wife, Jennifer. Many of you know her reputation in the restaurant industry, but what you may not know is that she's the reason we avoided the Hartwell Industries disaster. Her expertise in regulatory compliance saved us $20 million. The room buzzed with interested murmurs as Patrick outlined Jennifer's contributions to recent business decisions. Far from treating her as a liability, he was showcasing her intelligence and business acumen. Going forward, Patrick continued, Jennifer will be taking on an official advisory role with the company. Her insights into community development and small business growth will be invaluable as we expand our urban renewal initiatives. Jennifer felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Instead of allowing Eleanor's attacks to drive a wedge between them, Patrick was publicly claiming her as his intellectual equal and business partner. That evening, they attended another social function, this time a gallery opening where Charleston's art community mingled with business leaders. But this time, their interaction was different. Patrick wasn't just playing the role of devoted husband. He was genuinely proud to show her off. Have you met my wife? Became his standard introduction, followed by detailed explanations of Jennifer's business background and recent contributions to his company. By the end of the evening, Jennifer had been approached by 3 different entrepreneurs wanting to discuss potential collaborations. You're building me a new reputation, she said as they walked through the gallery's sculpture garden. I'm showing people who you really are, Patrick corrected. Eleanor wants them to see you as a gold digger who trapped me into marriage. I want them to see the brilliant, accomplished woman who chose to build something with me. The sincerity in his voice made Jennifer's heart ache with love. Patrick, about us, about what's happening between us. What about it? He asked, stopping beside a fountain where the sound of water would mask their conversation from any listening ears. I'm falling in love with you, Jennifer admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Not with your money or your power or what you can do for me. With you, the man who fights for communities that don't have voices, who sees potential where others see problems, who's brave enough to change his world. Patrick's response was to pull her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I fell in love with you weeks ago, he confessed. I just didn't know how to tell you without making you think it was part of the arrangement. It's not, is it? Jennifer needed to hear him say it. This isn't about the contract anymore. The contract was about survival, Patrick said firmly. This is about the rest of our lives. Their lovemaking that night was different from anything they'd shared before. Deeper, more intimate, charged with the knowledge that they were choosing each other freely. There were no pretenses, no performances for outside observers. Just 2 people who'd found something precious in the midst of chaos. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the darkness of Patrick's bedroom, Jennifer felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. Despite Eleanor's attacks, despite the ongoing legal battles, despite the uncertainty surrounding Marcus's conviction, she was exactly where she belonged. "Whatever Eleanor throws at us next," she whispered against Patrick's chest, "we face it together." "Together," Patrick agreed, his arms tightening around her protectively. But even as they made their promises, neither of them could have anticipated the storm that was coming. Eleanor's next move would test not just their love, but their ability to trust each other when everything they'd built was at stake. The war for Patrick's inheritance had become a war for their hearts, and the most dangerous battles were still ahead. Chapter 7. The Enemy Within. The deadliest enemies weren't the ones who declared war openly. They were the ones who smiled at your dinner table while poisoning your wine. Jennifer sat in the corner booth of Magnolia Cafe, a small restaurant tucked away in Charleston's French Quarter, watching David Chen through the rain-streaked window as he hurried down the narrow cobblestone street. Patrick's chief financial officer moved with the nervous energy of a man carrying secrets, constantly checking over his shoulder as if expecting to be followed. She'd been tracking David's movements for 3 days now, ever since she'd noticed discrepancies in the company's quarterly reports that didn't match the financial summaries Patrick had been receiving. Numbers that were off by millions, projected losses that didn't align with actual performance, board recommendations based on incomplete data. Someone was feeding Patrick false information, and David was the common thread. Jennifer's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Still think I'm paranoid? Check your email." The attached photos made Jennifer's blood run cold. David entering a high-end restaurant through a back entrance, sitting across from Marcus Sando in a private dining room, shaking hands over what appeared to be documents and a thick envelope. The timestamp showed the meeting had taken place yesterday, while Patrick was in Atlanta on business. Her second phone buzzed, the secure device Patrick had given her for emergencies. His voice was tight with controlled panic when she answered. "Jennifer, where are you? I need you to come home immediately." "What's wrong?" She was already standing, throwing money on the table for her untouched coffee. "The Meridian deal fell through, completely collapsed. David says there were compliance issues we missed, environmental problems that would have cost us hundreds of millions." Patrick's voice carried a strain she'd never heard before. "I'm starting to think someone sabotaged the negotiations." Jennifer's mind raced as she hurried to her car. The Meridian acquisition was Patrick's largest pending deal, worth nearly $1 billion and crucial to his strategic expansion plans. If it had been deliberately sabotaged. "Patrick, don't discuss any details over the phone," she said carefully. "And don't trust David with any new information until I get back." "What are you talking about? David's been with the company for 8 years. He's one of my most trusted—" "Patrick." Jennifer's voice was sharp with urgency. "Please, just trust me on this." The drive back to the estate felt endless, Jennifer's mind churning through the implications of David's betrayal. If he'd been feeding information to Marcus, how long had it been going on? How many deals had been compromised? How much damage had already been done? She found Patrick in his study, surrounded by financial documents and wearing the expression of a man watching his empire crumble. David sat across from him, his face a mask of professional concern that Jennifer now recognized as expertly crafted deception. "David," Jennifer said pleasantly as she entered the room, "I'm surprised to see you here so late." "Mrs. Sando," David's smile was warm but didn't reach his eyes. "I was just briefing Patrick on the Meridian situation. Very unfortunate development." "Indeed." Jennifer moved to stand behind Patrick's chair, her hand resting on his shoulder. "I'm curious about the environmental compliance issues that killed the deal. Could you walk me through the specific regulations that were violated? For just a moment, David's composure slipped. Jennifer caught the flash of uncertainty in his eyes before he recovered. Well, it's quite technical, David began. EPA standards for industrial wastewater, soil contamination levels, air quality measurements. Specifically, which EPA standards? Jennifer pressed. And which state regulations? I assume you verified the violations with independent environmental consultants? David's pause was a fraction too long. Of course, standard due diligence. Jennifer smiled coldly. Interesting, because I spent 2 years navigating those exact regulations when I was expanding my restaurant chain. The standards you're describing don't apply to Meridian's industry classification. In fact, their facilities fall under completely different environmental protocols. The silence in the room was deafening. Patrick's head turned slowly to look at David, understanding dawning in his steel-gray eyes. David, Patrick's voice was dangerously quiet. I think you need to explain yourself. Patrick, I can explain, David began, but Jennifer cut him off. Let me help, she said, pulling out her phone to display the photos Maya had sent. These might clarify things. David's face went white as he stared at the images of his meeting with Marcus. Patrick rose slowly from his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to fury to something approaching betrayal. 8 years, Patrick said quietly. 8 years you've worked for me. I trusted you with everything. Patrick, please. David's professional mask finally cracked completely. You don't understand. I never wanted to hurt the company. I was trying to protect it. By sabotaging billion-dollar deals. Jennifer's voice was incredulous. By saving it from this insanity. David exploded, his composure finally shattering. This marriage, this whole inheritance charade, it's destroying everything you've built. Marcus may be ruthless, but at least he understands business. He's not making decisions based on his emotions. Patrick stepped closer to David, his presence suddenly menacing. What decisions are you referring to? The urban development projects that lose money every quarter, the environmental initiatives that cost millions in profits, the diversity programs that alienate traditional investors. David's voice rose with each accusation. You've changed since you married her, Patrick. You're not thinking clearly. Or maybe I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years, Patrick replied coldly. Tell me, David, how long have you been feeding information to Marcus? David's silence was answer enough. The environmental lawsuits, Jennifer realized suddenly. The zoning challenges, the media campaigns questioning Patrick's leadership. You provided Marcus with the inside information he needed to orchestrate all of it. I was trying to wake you up, David said desperately, turning to Patrick. To make you see that this path you're on is suicide. The board is already questioning your judgment. The family is circling like vultures. Marcus doesn't need to destroy you. You're doing it yourself. Patrick's laugh was bitter. And you thought betraying me to my cousin was the solution. How much did he pay you, David? It wasn't about money, David's voice broke. It was about saving what we built together. What you and I built together before she came along and poisoned everything. The emphasis on she made Jennifer's skin crawl, but it was the look in David's eyes when he said it that made her understand. This wasn't just about business or loyalty or even Marcus's bribes. You're in love with him, she said quietly. You're in love with Patrick. David's face crumpled, all pretense finally abandoned. Yes, he whispered, for years. And I watched you waltz in here and steal him away with your fake marriage and your convenient pregnancy and your... Enough. Patrick's voice cut through David's confession like a blade. Get out. Security will escort you from the building. Your employment is terminated immediately, and if I find any evidence that you've taken proprietary information, I'll have you prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. David looked at Patrick with desperate pleading. Patrick, please, I love you. I've always loved you. We could have been. We could never have been anything, Patrick said firmly. Because I don't love you, David. I never have, and I never will. And even if I did, I could never forgive what you've done. After David was escorted from the estate by security, Patrick and Jennifer sat in his study in stunned silence. The magnitude of the betrayal was overwhelming, not just the business sabotage, but the personal violation of trust that had been going on for months. How did I miss it? Patrick asked finally, his voice hollow. 8 years, and I never saw who he really was. Because you trusted him, Jennifer said gently. Because you're a good man who believes in the best of people. A good man who's been systematically betrayed by someone I considered family, Patrick replied bitterly. How many deals has he sabotaged? How much has Marcus learned about our personal lives? How much damage has been done? Jennifer moved to sit beside him on the leather sofa, taking his hand in hers, despite the emotional distance he'd been maintaining since their night together. We'll figure it out. We'll rebuild whatever needs rebuilding. But Patrick, you have to know that David was wrong about one thing. Your changes to the company aren't weaknesses, they're strengths. Patrick looked at her with exhausted eyes. Are they? Because right now it feels like everything I touch turns to ash. The urban development projects have housed 300 families and created over 1,000 jobs, Jennifer said firmly. The environmental initiatives have reduced your carbon footprint by 40%, while actually increasing efficiency. The diversity programs have brought in some of your most innovative employees. David couldn't see the long-term value because he was blinded by jealousy and fear. Maybe, Patrick said quietly. Or maybe I've been making emotional decisions that compromise sound business judgment. Jennifer felt a stab of pain at his words, recognizing the doubt David had planted taking root. Is that what you think? That your feelings for me have compromised your judgment? Patrick was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I think, he said finally, that loving you has made me braver and more compassionate and more willing to take risks for the right reasons. But I also think it's made me vulnerable in ways I've never been before. Before Jennifer could respond, a sharp pain shot through her abdomen, making her gasp and double over. Patrick was beside her instantly, his hands gentle but urgent, as he helped her lie back on the sofa. What's wrong? He asked, his voice tight with fear. Another pain, sharper this time, accompanied by a wetness that made Jennifer's heart stop. Patrick, she whispered, terror flooding her voice. Something's wrong with the baby. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency rooms and medical tests, and Patrick's hand gripping hers with desperate strength. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Jennifer's obstetrician, finally emerged from the examination room with the expression that was carefully neutral. The good news is that the baby is fine, Dr. Martinez said, and Jennifer felt Patrick's entire body sag with relief. What you experienced was implantation bleeding, which can be alarming but is completely normal. However, I am concerned about your stress levels. Your blood pressure is elevated, and stress can be dangerous for both you and the baby. What kind of stress? Patrick asked, though Jennifer suspected he already knew the answer. Any kind, Dr. Martinez replied seriously. Work stress, relationship stress, family drama. Pregnancy makes you more vulnerable to all of it. I'm recommending modified bed rest for the next week, minimal activity, and absolutely no high-stress situations. As they drove home from the hospital, Patrick was uncharacteristically quiet. Jennifer could see him processing the doctor's warnings, adding them to his growing list of fears about their situation. She's right, you know, he said finally as they pulled into their driveway. The stress is too much. Marcus's attacks, David's betrayal, the constant surveillance. It's not safe for you or the baby. Patrick, Jennifer began, but he cut her off. I've been thinking about this all wrong, he continued. I've been so focused on fighting Marcus that I haven't considered the cost. What if we just gave him what he wants? Jennifer stared at him in shock. You want to give up? After everything we've been through? I want to keep you safe, Patrick said fiercely. Both of you. The inheritance isn't worth your life or our child's life. And what about the thousands of people whose lives will be destroyed if Marcus takes over? What about the communities you're trying to help? What about everything you've built? Patrick was quiet for a long moment. Maybe some things are more important than business empires. Yes, Jennifer agreed. Like love, like trust, like fighting for what you believe in. She turned to face him fully. Patrick, I'm not giving up. On the company, on our marriage, or on us. David was wrong about your judgment being compromised. If anything, loving me has made you a better leader and a better man. Patrick studied her face in the dim light of the car's interior. Even if it costs us everything. Especially then, Jennifer said firmly, because what we have is worth fighting for. For the first time since their night together, Patrick's emotional walls seemed to crack. He reached for her, pulling her into his arms with desperate intensity. I'm scared, he admitted against her hair. I've never been this scared of losing something. Then don't lose it, Jennifer whispered back. Fight for it. Fight for us. As they held each other in the darkness, Jennifer felt hope stirring in her chest. David's betrayal had shaken them both, but it had also revealed something important. When everything was stripped away, the business, the inheritance, the external pressures, what remained was their love for each other. Now they just had to prove that love was strong enough to survive the war Marcus was determined to wage against them. Chapter 8. Truth and Betrayal. Sometimes the truth was a weapon more powerful than any lie, and sometimes it was the only thing standing between love and total destruction. Jennifer stood in the abandoned warehouse that had once housed her flagship restaurant's catering operation. Surrounded by boxes of financial records she'd spent the last 5 days painstakingly assembling since David's betrayal gave her access to Marcus's systems. The space smelled of dust and broken dreams, but tonight it would serve as the war room, where she'd finally expose Marcus Sando for what he truly was. Her laptop screen glowed in the darkness, displaying financial records that David had reluctantly provided after his emotional breakdown. His guilt over betraying Patrick had finally overcome his loyalty to Marcus, and he'd given Jennifer access to accounts and communications that revealed the true scope of the conspiracy. Working with Maya and Patrick's legal team, Jennifer had spent days connecting the dots between Marcus's shell companies, bribed officials, and falsified reports. Her Harvard MBA training in forensic accounting had proven invaluable in untangling the complex web of financial manipulation. This is insane, Maya whispered, leaning over Jennifer's shoulder to study the evidence. He's been planning Patrick's downfall for years, hasn't he? Since the day their grandfather's will was read, Jennifer confirmed, clicking through another series of bank records. Look at this. Payments to the insurance company that denied my claims, bribes to city officials who blocked Patrick's development projects, even money to the journalists who wrote those hit pieces about our marriage. The scope of Marcus's operation was staggering. He'd systematically dismantled Patrick's support network, isolated him from allies, and created crises designed to make him appear incompetent, all while positioning himself as the stable, traditional alternative the family needed. How did you figure all this out? Maya asked. David, Jennifer replied grimly. Before security escorted him out, he gave me access codes to financial systems Marcus thought were secure. I think seeing Patrick's reaction to his betrayal finally made him realize what he'd become part of. Jennifer's phone buzzed with a message from Patrick. Where are you? We need to talk. She'd been avoiding him for 2 days, claiming she needed rest while secretly working 18-hour days to uncover the truth. Patrick thought she was following doctor's orders and staying in bed. He had no idea she was building the case that would save his empire. "You have to tell him," Maya said, reading her expression. "He's worried sick about you." "Not yet," Jennifer replied, saving her work to multiple encrypted drives. "I need one more piece of evidence, something that proves Marcus was behind the original embezzlement charges against me." "Why does that matter? You already have enough to bury him." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, staring at the financial web on her screen. "Because I need Patrick to know that loving me didn't compromise his judgment. I need him to see that Marcus manufactured every crisis, every doubt, every reason Patrick might have to question our relationship." An hour later, Jennifer found what she was looking for buried in Marcus's personal financial records. A payment of $50,000 to Michael Chen, her former business partner, dated 2 weeks before Hurricane Elena. The payment memo read, "Consulting Services, MC Restaurant Group Acquisition Prep." Marcus had paid Michael to embezzle from her companies, creating the financial instability that would force her into accepting Patrick's proposal. He'd orchestrated her downfall specifically to make her desperate enough to enter into their arrangement, then used that same desperation to discredit their marriage. Jennifer felt sick as the full scope of Marcus's manipulation became clear. He hadn't just attacked Patrick's business. He'd destroyed her life as collateral damage, treating her dreams and livelihood as acceptable casualties in his quest for power. Her hands shook as she copied the files to the final drive. Everything Marcus had touched was poisoned, corrupted by his willingness to destroy anyone who stood in his way. But finally, she had the evidence to stop him. The drive back to the estate felt surreal, like she was moving through a dream. In her purse sat the proof that would change everything, not just for her and Patrick, but for every person Marcus had ever hurt. Tomorrow she would present the evidence to Patrick's legal team and watch Marcus's empire of lies crumble. She found Patrick in his study, pacing behind his desk like a caged predator. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, but the tension in the room was as dark as a storm cloud. "Where have you been?" Patrick asked, relief flooding his features when she entered. "Dr. Martinez said you missed your appointment yesterday, and when I came home you were already asleep. I was starting to worry that—" "I have something to show you," Jennifer interrupted, pulling the encrypted drive from her purse. "Something that's going to change everything." Patrick moved around the desk as she inserted the drive into his computer. The financial records filled the screen, painting their damning picture of corruption and conspiracy. "This is why I've been absent," Jennifer said as the evidence loaded. "David gave me access to Marcus's financial systems before he left. These records show every bribe, every forged document, every illegal payment Marcus has made in his campaign to destroy you." Patrick leaned over the computer, his expression shifting from confusion to fury as he absorbed the scope of his cousin's betrayal. Bank records, email communications, payment schedules, everything was there, meticulously documented. "My God," Patrick breathed. "He's been planning this for years. Every crisis you've faced, every setback, every moment of doubt, Marcus orchestrated all of it." Jennifer continued, clicking through the files. The environmental lawsuits were based on falsified reports he commissioned. The media campaigns were funded through shell companies he controlled. Even the board members questioning your leadership were being paid to create instability. Patrick straightened slowly, his gaze moving from the computer screen to Jennifer's face. "You did this. You uncovered all of this while I thought you were resting." "I had to," Jennifer said simply. "Someone needed to fight for us, for what we've built together, and I needed to prove that Marcus created every doubt, every crisis that made you question whether loving me was a mistake." Patrick moved toward her with an expression of wonder and fierce pride. "Jennifer, This is incredible. This evidence will destroy him completely. But how did you— Before he could finish the question, Jennifer's phone rang. The number was blocked, but something compelled her to answer. Mrs. Sando, Eleanor's honeyed voice filled the room. I trust you've been busy gathering your little financial documents. Jennifer felt ice flood her veins. How did you— Marcus told me you might try something like this. So predictable, really. The desperate wife trying to save her husband's empire. Eleanor's laugh was crystalline and cold. I'm afraid it's too late for evidence gathering, dear. What do you mean? Check the news, darling. About 20 minutes ago, an anonymous tip led federal agents to discover what appears to be classified financial information in your possession. Information that was allegedly stolen from Marcus's personal accounts while he was in federal custody. Jennifer's blood turned to ice as she understood the trap. You set this up. Marcus is many things, but he's not stupid. He knew someone would eventually gain access to his accounts, so he prepared accordingly. Every document you've gathered, every piece of evidence you think you have, it's all going to look like a desperate wife manufacturing proof to save her husband. Patrick was already on his phone, checking news feeds and legal databases. His face went white as he read. There's a warrant for your arrest, he said quietly, for theft of classified financial information and conspiracy to defraud federal investigators. Eleanor's voice continued from the phone. You have 1 hour to turn yourself in, Jennifer. If you don't, they'll issue a warrant for Patrick as well, claiming he was complicit in the theft. Your choice. Destroy yourself to save him, or destroy you both. The line went dead, leaving Jennifer staring at her phone with a mixture of rage and despair. Everything she'd worked for, all the evidence she'd gathered, it was being turned against her by people who had no limits to their cruelty. This isn't over, Patrick said fiercely, pulling her into his arms. They think they've won, but they've made a critical mistake. What mistake? Jennifer asked, her voice barely a whisper. They've assumed that evidence is all we have. Patrick's smile was sharp as a blade. But we have something they don't understand. We have each other. And when you fight for someone you love, you don't just use their weapons. You create new ones. As sirens began wailing in the distance, Jennifer realized that their final battle was just beginning. Marcus and Eleanor thought they'd won by turning the law against them, but they'd underestimated the power of two people who refused to let evil triumph over love. The real war was about to begin, and this time Jennifer and Patrick would write the rules. Chapter 9. Love's Revelation. Victory had a way of arriving just when you thought defeat was certain, but true enemies never surrendered until they'd played their final, most desperate card. The grand ballroom of the Charleston Harbor Resort sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the laughter of 300 guests celebrating Sando Industries' most successful quarter in company history. Marcus was in federal prison awaiting trial, David's sabotage had been exposed and reversed, and Patrick stood at the podium delivering a speech about resilience, transformation, and the power of fighting for what you believe in. Jennifer watched from her seat at the head table, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. At 36 weeks pregnant with twins, she felt radiant in the midnight blue gown Patrick had chosen for her, a dress that celebrated rather than hid her pregnancy. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of testimony, legal proceedings, and rebuilding, but tonight was about celebration and hope for the future. Most of all, Patrick said, his gaze finding hers across the crowded room, I want to thank my wife, Jennifer, whose intelligence, courage, and unwavering strength saved not just this company, but everything I hold dear. She didn't just help me win a war, she taught me what was worth fighting for. The applause was thunderous, but Jennifer only had eyes for Patrick as he left the podium and moved toward her table. His smile was radiant, free of the shadows and doubts that had haunted him for months. He looked like a man who'd found his purpose and claimed his happiness. "Dance with me?" he asked, extending his hand as the orchestra began playing. "I'm hardly in dancing condition," Jennifer laughed, gesturing to her prominent belly. "You're perfect," Patrick murmured, pulling her gently into his arms as they swayed to the music. "You've been perfect from the moment I met you." Around them, other couples joined the dance floor, but Jennifer felt like she and Patrick were alone in their own world. His hand splayed protectively over her belly, and she could feel the babies, twins they'd learned at 20 weeks, responding to their father's touch with gentle movements. "Have I told you today that I love you?" Patrick asked, his lips brushing her ear. "Only about 50 times," Jennifer replied, melting into his warmth. "But I don't mind hearing it again. I love you, Jennifer Sando. I love our children. I love the life we're building together." Patrick's voice was soft, intimate despite their public setting. "And I have something I want to ask you." Jennifer looked up at him in confusion. "Patrick, we're already married." "Legally, yes, but that was a contractual agreement, signed in desperation by two people who barely knew each other." Patrick stopped dancing, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "I want to marry you again. Not because of contracts or inheritances or external pressures, but because I choose you, because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you're the best decision I ever made." Patrick dropped to one knee right there on the dance floor, pulling a ring box from his jacket pocket. The diamond was magnificent, not the largest stone money could buy, but perfectly cut and set in a design that was both classic and uniquely beautiful. "Jennifer wore Sando," Patrick said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. "Will you marry me? Again? For real this time?" Jennifer felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at the man kneeling before her. This wasn't the cold billionaire who'd proposed a business arrangement 10 months ago. This was Patrick, her Patrick, offering his heart without conditions or contracts. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." The ballroom erupted in applause as Patrick slipped the ring onto her finger, but Jennifer barely heard it. She was lost in Patrick's kiss, in the feeling of absolute rightness that came from being exactly where she belonged. That's when the first contraction hit. Jennifer gasped, her hand flying to her belly as pain radiated through her abdomen. Patrick was on his feet instantly, his businessman's calm replaced by protective panic. "What's wrong?" he asked urgently. "I think—" Another contraction, stronger this time, made Jennifer double over. "Patrick, I think the babies are coming." The next hour passed in a blur of sirens, medical personnel, and Patrick's hand gripping hers in the back of an ambulance. At 36 weeks, the twins weren't technically premature, but their early arrival had caught everyone off guard. "Twins often arrive a few weeks early," Dr. Martinez assured them as they rushed into Charleston General's maternity ward. "Their heart rates are strong, and your vital signs are stable. We're going to take very good care of all of you." The labor progressed quickly, faster than Jennifer had expected from all her reading about first pregnancies. She'd envisioned a calm, controlled delivery with time to prepare and process. Instead, she found herself in active labor with contractions coming fast and strong, her carefully planned birth experience thrown out the window. "I can't do this," she gasped between contractions, sweat beading on her forehead. "It's too fast, too intense, too—" "Yes, you can," Patrick said firmly, his voice cutting through her panic. "You're the strongest person I know, Jennifer. You built an empire, survived its destruction, exposed a criminal conspiracy, and saved my life in more ways than I can count. You can absolutely do this." His certainty anchored her, reminding her of her own strength when pain threatened to overwhelm her. Patrick had been with her through every challenge of the past months. He wasn't going to leave her now. "Okay," Jennifer said, gripping his hand. Okay, let's meet our babies. The delivery room filled with controlled chaos as medical staff prepared for the twins' arrival. Jennifer pushed when instructed, breathed when coached, and held onto Patrick's strength when her own threatened to fail. "Here comes baby number one," Dr. Martinez announced, and suddenly a tiny, perfect cry filled the room. "It's a girl," the doctor said, holding up a small but healthy baby with a powerful set of lungs. "And she's beautiful." Jennifer sobbed with relief and joy as their daughter was placed briefly on her chest before being whisked away for evaluation. The baby's skin was a perfect blend of both parents, and her cry was strong and demanding, already showing her personality. "One more, Doctor," Martinez said. "Here we go with baby number two." Their son arrived 8 minutes later, just as healthy and vocal as his sister. Patrick was crying openly now, his composure completely shattered by the miracle of holding his children for the first time. "They're perfect," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "They're absolutely perfect." "5 pounds, 6 ounces for your daughter," the nurse announced. "5 pounds, 8 ounces for your son. Excellent weights for 36-week twins with perfect APGAR scores." Jennifer watched Patrick hold their children with a reverence that made her fall in love with him all over again. This man who commanded boardrooms and built empires was completely undone by the two tiny humans they'd created together. "What should we name them?" Patrick asked softly. They'd discussed names but never settled on anything definitive. Now, looking at their children's faces, Jennifer felt certainty settle over her. "Elena," she said, looking at their daughter, "for strength through storms." "And William," she paused, seeing Patrick's surprised expression. "After your grandfather. Not the man who created that cruel will, but the man who ultimately protected you from Marcus by designing safeguards you didn't even know existed." Patrick smiled through his tears. "Elena and William Sando. I love it." The next few hours passed in a haze of feeding attempts, diaper changes, and the overwhelming realization that they were parents. The twins were healthy and alert, and the medical staff assured them that everything was progressing perfectly. Jennifer was resting when Patrick's phone rang with an urgent call from his lawyer. She watched his expression change from contentment to concern, to cold fury as he listened to whatever news was being delivered. "What is it?" she asked when he hung up. Patrick's jaw was tight with controlled anger. "Eleanor, she's filed an emergency injunction claiming that our marriage was fraudulent and that the twins can't be considered legitimate heirs." Jennifer felt ice flood her veins. "What?" "She's produced what appeared to be medical records suggesting you were involved with someone else during the conception window. DNA evidence that allegedly proves I'm not the biological father." Patrick's voice was deadly calm. "If the claims are substantiated, it would void the inheritance clause entirely." "But that's impossible," Jennifer said, panic rising in her chest. "You know these children are yours. We both know." "I know," Patrick said firmly. "And you know. But Eleanor is betting that the legal system will require extensive DNA testing and investigation, which could take months. Long enough for Marcus's allies to challenge my position and potentially overturn his conviction." Jennifer stared at their sleeping children, fury building in her chest. Even from prison, Marcus was still trying to destroy them, using Eleanor as his weapon to attack the most precious thing they'd created together. "The documents are sophisticated," Patrick continued. "Medical records, hotel receipts, witness statements, all designed to create reasonable doubt about paternity. My legal team thinks Eleanor has been planning this for weeks. Can we fight it?" "We'll have to. But Jennifer, this could get ugly. They'll drag our relationship through the media, question every aspect of our marriage, put our children's legitimacy under public scrutiny." Patrick's expression was pained. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted our family to become a battlefield." Jennifer looked from Patrick to their sleeping twins, feeling a fierce protectiveness rise in her chest. These children were theirs, created in love, born from their partnership, the living proof of everything they'd overcome together. "Let her try," Jennifer said quietly, her voice carrying a steel that would have made Marcus himself nervous. "Let Eleanor and whoever's helping her bring their fake evidence and their lies. Because we have something they don't." "What's that?" Jennifer met Patrick's gaze, seeing her own determination reflected there. "The truth. And two children who will grow up knowing they were wanted, loved, and fought for by parents who refused to let anyone destroy their family." Patrick leaned down to kiss her, soft and fierce and full of promise. "I love you, Mrs. Sandow. All three of you." "We love you too," Jennifer whispered back. "And we're going to win this fight. All of us, together." Outside their hospital room, the war was far from over. Eleanor's desperate gambit would bring new challenges, new battles, new tests of their love and commitment. But inside that quiet space, surrounded by the soft breathing of their newborn children, Jennifer felt unshakable certainty. They'd survived everything that had been thrown at them so far. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family, as partners, as two people who'd learned that love was worth any fight. The final battle was coming, but Jennifer was ready for it, because some things were worth protecting at any cost, and the family she'd built with Patrick was definitely one of them. Chapter 10. Love Conquers All. The greatest inheritances weren't written in wills. They were built through love, courage, and the unshakable belief that some battles were worth fighting no matter the cost. 3 weeks after the twins' birth, Jennifer stood in the conference room of Charleston's federal courthouse, her newborn daughter, Elena, sleeping peacefully in her arms while Patrick held their son, William. The emergency hearing that would determine their family's fate was about to begin, with Eleanor's legal team presenting their fabricated evidence to a judge who held their future in his hands. The past weeks had been a nightmare of legal maneuvering, media scrutiny, and sleepless nights caring for newborns while fighting for their legitimacy. Eleanor's claims had thrown the inheritance into dispute, and Marcus's allies were using the chaos to challenge Patrick's control of the company. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Blackwood," the bailiff announced. Judge Blackwood was a formidable woman in her 60s, known for her sharp intellect and intolerance for courtroom games. Her eyes swept the packed courtroom, taking in the media representatives, family members, and legal teams that had gathered for what promised to be the final chapter in the Sandow inheritance battle. "Be seated," Judge Blackwood said crisply. "This is an emergency hearing regarding claims of paternity fraud in the matter of the Sandow Family Trust. Counselor Morrison, you may present your evidence." Eleanor's lawyer, a sharp-featured man with cold eyes, stood and activated the courtroom's digital display system. "Your Honor, we have compelling evidence that Mrs. Jennifer Sandow engaged in extramarital affairs during the conception period of the children in question, raising serious doubts about their paternity." The fabricated evidence was impressive. Doctored hotel records showing Jennifer meeting with various men, manipulated cell phone records suggesting secret communications, even witness statements from people claiming to have seen intimate behavior between Jennifer and her supposed lovers. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "we have obtained what appear to be preliminary DNA results, suggesting that Mr. Patrick Sandow is not the biological father of these children." Jennifer felt Patrick's hand find hers as the lawyer presented document after document designed to destroy their family. Eleanor sat at the plaintiff's table with a satisfied smile, clearly believing her plan was working perfectly. "Your Honor," Patrick's lawyer, Margaret Whitfield, stood to address the court. "The defense requests permission to present counter-evidence." "Proceed," Judge Blackwood said. Margaret activated her own presentation system, and the first image that appeared made Eleanor's smile falter. It was security footage from the hotel where Jennifer had allegedly conducted her affairs. Clear video showing her entering and leaving alone, meeting only with her legal team about her criminal defense. Every piece of evidence presented by the plaintiff has been forensically analyzed and found to be falsified, Margaret announced. Hotel records have been altered, phone logs have been manipulated, and witness statements have been obtained through bribery and coercion. The evidence of Eleanor's deception was overwhelming. FBI forensic experts testified about digital manipulation, hotel managers confirmed that their records had been tampered with, and several of Eleanor's witnesses recanted their statements when faced with perjury charges. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. "Your Honor," Margaret said, "we call Michael Chen to the stand." Jennifer's former business partner entered the courtroom in federal custody, having been arrested weeks earlier when the FBI investigation exposed Marcus's network. The confident entrepreneur she'd once trusted looked broken, defeated, ready to tell the truth about his role in the conspiracy that had destroyed her life. "Mr. Chen," Margaret began, "please tell the court about your relationship with Marcus Sando." "Marcus approached me 2 years ago," Michael said quietly. Patrick was 33 then, and Marcus knew the inheritance deadline was approaching. He was afraid Jennifer might eventually cross paths with Patrick and complicate his plans. The courtroom was silent as Michael detailed Marcus's long-term strategy, the systematic destruction of Jennifer's business empire, the embezzlement designed to make her desperate, even the hurricane damage that Marcus had somehow learned about in advance and used to his advantage. "Eleanor contacted me 3 weeks ago," Michael continued. "She offered to reduce my federal sentence if I would testify that I had an affair with Jennifer during her marriage to Patrick. When I refused, she threatened to have me killed in prison." Eleanor shot to her feet. "That's a lie. I never—" "Sit down, Ms. Hartwell," Judge Blackwood ordered sharply. "You'll have your chance to respond." But Eleanor's chance never came. As Michael testified about the full scope of the conspiracy, FBI agents entered the courtroom with new arrest warrants. Eleanor was taken into custody for conspiracy, perjury, and witness tampering while her lawyer frantically tried to distance himself from the fabricated evidence. "Your Honor," Margaret said once order was restored, "we also have definitive DNA results that prove beyond any doubt that Patrick Sando is the biological father of both children." The real DNA test results were unequivocal. Patrick's paternity was confirmed with 99.98% certainty for both twins. Elena and William were undeniably his children, making them legal heirs to the Sando fortune. But the most surprising revelation came from the FBI investigation itself. "Your Honor," Margaret continued, "during the investigation into Marcus Sando's financial crimes, federal agents discovered additional evidence that directly impacts this inheritance case." She presented a folder filled with correspondence between Marcus and various financial institutions, legal firms, and government officials. The documents revealed a conspiracy that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. "Marcus Sando has been engaged in systematic financial fraud for over a decade," Margaret announced. "Tax evasion, money laundering, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy to defraud the federal government. These crimes have resulted in the forfeiture of his personal assets under federal racketeering statutes." Judge Blackwood reviewed the documents carefully. "Are you saying that Marcus Sando's share of the family inheritance is subject to federal seizure?" "Yes, Your Honor. Marcus Sando has forfeited any claim to the family trust through his criminal activities. Under the terms of Harrison Sando's will, if any heir is disqualified through criminal activity, their share reverts entirely to the remaining legitimate heir." The courtroom erupted as the implications became clear. Marcus's own crimes had not only eliminated him from consideration, they had secured Patrick's inheritance completely and permanently. Based on the evidence presented, Judge Blackwood announced, I find that the paternity claims against Mr. Patrick Sandow are completely without merit and based on fabricated evidence. The children, Elena and William Sandow, are the legitimate heirs of Patrick Sandow. Furthermore, given Marcus Sandow's criminal disqualification, Patrick Sandow is now the sole and uncontested heir to the entire Sandow family trust. The courtroom erupted in celebration as Jennifer and Patrick were finally, legally, unquestionably recognized as a legitimate family. But for Jennifer, the real victory was simpler and more profound. She was holding her daughter while the man she loved held their son, and no one could ever again question whether they belonged together. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed, but Jennifer only had eyes for Patrick as he pulled her into his arms, careful not to disturb the sleeping babies. "It's over," he whispered against her hair. "It's finally over." "No," Jennifer corrected softly. "It's just beginning." 1 year later, Jennifer stood in the kitchen of her new flagship restaurant, Second Chances, watching Patrick play with their now toddling twins in the dining room through the pass-through window. The restaurant was located in one of Patrick's urban development projects, serving a community that had been transformed by their combined vision and resources. The space was beautiful. Warm woods, soft lighting, and the kind of atmosphere that made people want to linger over meals and conversation. But more than beautiful, it was meaningful. The restaurant employed dozens of people from the surrounding community, sourced ingredients from local farms, and served as a gathering place for neighborhood events and celebrations. "Behind you, chef," Maya called out, carrying a tray of Jennifer's signature desserts toward the dining room. Her best friend had become the restaurant's general manager, finally finding her own purpose in helping Jennifer rebuild her culinary empire. "How are we looking for tonight?" Jennifer asked, checking the reservation system on her tablet. "Completely booked, as usual," Maya replied with a grin, "including a table for 12 from the city council. I think they want to discuss expanding the community kitchen program." Jennifer smiled, remembering when she'd thought her dreams were dead and buried. Now she was running a restaurant empire that was more successful and more meaningful than anything she'd built before. Patrick's financial backing had been crucial, but the vision, the innovation, and the heart of the enterprise were entirely hers. "Mama!" Elena toddled into the kitchen, her dark curls bouncing as Patrick chased after her with William in his arms. "Sorry," Patrick said, scooping up their daughter before she could reach the hot stoves. "Someone escaped while I was changing her brother's diaper." Jennifer laughed, marveling at how domestic Patrick had become. The man who'd once lived for board meetings and business deals now scheduled his entire life around nap times and feeding schedules. He was still CEO of Sandow Industries, but he'd restructured the company to focus on sustainable development and community impact rather than pure profit maximization. "How was the board meeting?" Jennifer asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Productive. We approved funding for 3 new community development projects, including the one in North Charleston you suggested." Patrick's smile was radiant with pride and purpose. "The board loves your ideas about integrating commercial kitchens with residential developments." "Of course they do," Jennifer said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "We make a pretty good team." "The best," Patrick agreed, his eyes warm with the love that still made her heart skip beats. That evening, after the restaurant closed and the twins were asleep in their nursery at home, Jennifer and Patrick sat on their bedroom balcony overlooking the gardens. The Charleston skyline glittered in the distance, but Jennifer's favorite view was the man beside her, reading financial reports while absently stroking her hair. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "The way we started? The contract, the arrangement, all of it." Patrick set aside his papers and pulled her closer, his expression serious. Never, not even for a moment. Even though it was built on desperation rather than choice. It was built on recognition, Patrick corrected. From the moment I saw you at that party, I recognized something in you that I'd been searching for without knowing it. Intelligence, strength, beauty, grace under pressure. Everything I didn't even know I needed. Jennifer traced patterns on his chest, still amazed by the solid warmth of him, the certainty of his presence in her life. I recognized something too, she admitted. A man who would fight for what he believed in, who would choose principle over convenience, who would be brave enough to change when change was needed. We saved each other, Patrick said simply. You saved me from a life of empty success, and I saved you from giving up on your dreams. And now? Patrick's smile was soft, intimate, full of promise. Now we build something neither of us could have created alone. A family, a legacy, a love story that our children will be proud to inherit. As they sat together in the darkness, Jennifer thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a desperate bargain between strangers and evolved into something neither of them had dared to hope for. A partnership that was equal parts business acumen and passionate love, built on mutual respect and unshakable trust. Marcus was serving a 25-year federal sentence for his crimes. Eleanor had been convicted on multiple charges and would spend the next decade in prison. David had cooperated with prosecutors and received a reduced sentence, though his career in finance was permanently over. But their defeats weren't what mattered to Jennifer. What mattered was the sleeping twins in the nursery down the hall, the successful restaurants that employed hundreds of people, the communities that were thriving because of Patrick's development projects, and the man whose heartbeat she could feel beneath her palm. I love you, Patrick Sando, she whispered into the Charleston night. I love you too, Jennifer Sando, he replied, his voice carrying all the certainty and passion and promise she could ever want. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, for as long as we both shall live. It was the vow they'd first spoken in a sterile courthouse as strangers bound by contract. Now they repeated it as lovers, partners, parents, and best friends who had chosen each other again and again through every trial and triumph. Some love stories began with passion at first sight. Others grew slowly from friendship and compatibility. But theirs had been forged in the crucible of shared adversity, tempered by trust earned through battle, and refined by the conscious choice to build something beautiful from the ashes of their individual struggles. It was a love story worth inheriting, worth fighting for, worth building a lifetime around. And as Jennifer fell asleep in Patrick's arms, she knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. After all, they had a family to raise, an empire to build, and a love to nurture that would last for generations to come.
Thanks for watching!